Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I'm your host, Denise Griffitts, and today we are diving deep into the world of transformative branding with the true industry maverick, Howard Lim. He's been here before, and it was fascinating. And with over 30 years of experience crafting influential brands for industry giants like Apple, Disney, and Honda, Howard is not just a brand architect, but he's a visionary. And he has helped companies add billions, with a B, billions of dollars in value. And as the founder of How Creative, HOW Creative, and the author of Authentic Branding, and I have that book, it's fascinating. I'm not joking, it's a fascinating book. Howard has developed a groundbreaking approach that goes beyond traditional marketing. His unique methodology focuses on appealing to customers through the head, heart, and gut, creating brands that don't just sell products, but build genuine connections. And today, Howard will unpack the critical shift to consumer-centric branding, revealing how businesses can design experiences that truly resonate with their audience. So get ready to learn how to transform your brand from generic to world-class, straight from a man who has done it time and time again for some of the most recognizable names in business. Howard, good morning and welcome back to Your Partner in Success. Before we get started, can you tell our audience a bit about yourself and how you like to present yourself in the world?
I appreciate being back on your podcast again. I'm really excited about this part two and how we're going to dive in deeper about branding and biz development and to give you a little bit about background more about who I am, what I do. Literally, what we do here is evolve to designing businesses. And what I mean by that is designing businesses from the inside out. We quite often do are one of the two things. We either design companies from scratch or we redesign them. Most of the time, about 80% of the time, we're redesigning companies because or upgrading them because they reached a lid and they simply don't know how to grow or scale their business. And so we come in and we design them from the inside out by helping them with their business model and figuring out what will make their business model more fruitful to drive in more revenue, more profit, and to attract better employees and increase their value. And then from the outside, design it from the inside out, we look at how we could upgrade their brand identity so they're more reflective about how they actually evolved and how they're more valuable to all their different stakeholders. So that's what I mean that we design businesses. It's an inside out approach.
I mentioned to you earlier in the green room how much I appreciate your book, Authentic Branding. And I happen to have a limited edition. I feel very special. And I've told you this before. The cover of that book is just stunning. And it lives on a bookcase closest to my desk where I can reach out and grab it. And I consider it a really important addition to my entrepreneurial library. So thank you.
You're welcome. Glad that you're enjoying it. That, by the way, you do have, it is literally the limited edition because the cover is unique. Although we sell it on Amazon and other bookstores, basically every major bookstore around the world. That one in particular, having a black cover, you're right. The what's called spot varnish and a thicker paper and having a matte cover is where we put a lot more time and energy in creating something that really reflects our brand.
And I'm telling you, and when I've said this before, I'm one of those people you will never catch me breaking the spine or turning a page down or marking it anyway because I'm convinced that my childhood librarian would rear up from her grave and get me. I am darn she would. And this book is so beautiful. The thought of marking it in any way is just not going to happen. But I love it. It's one of my favorite books. But Howard, I wanted to ask you, we've all heard about the importance of authenticity and branding.
Mhm.
And I guess my question is how can companies effectively build trust with consumers by
Mhm.
staying true to their values and consistently delivering on their promises? And I'll be honest with you right now, with the mess that we've got in governments across the world, nobody trusts anybody. Nobody trusts the media, nobody trusts government. So what I'm thinking that you're telling us is that companies need to genuinely build trust if they want to stay in business.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, they need to have clarity on their philosophy, why they exist, and then their values, what actually creates the culture so it could be felt from the inside out. And that honestly has to be monitored every moment of the day. And so when a company, let's say a company says they're, hey, we're about integrity, and they do something that's out of integrity, that actually, it's called brand equity, that could actually lessen the value of the brand because they're not aligned with their core values and their core philosophy. So, yes, that's how you build trust and maintain trust. But unfortunately, as a company grows, a lot of times, for first of all, a lot of companies don't even have the fundamentals in place as far as their philosophy and values. And these are just 2 out of 32 ingredients, by the way, but these are very important ingredients nevertheless. And the point being is that a lot of companies don't even have these, what I call the DNA pieces in place to actually start to build trust, but also make sure that they could also sustain trust for decades, if not centuries to come. And so when those things go away or are forgotten, that's when companies, countries, and even families and relationships start to collapse.
Here and now, we're seeing a lot of boycotts. We're seeing a lot of calls to, I think Costco's in a bit of trouble right now. You people are just saying, you're lying to us. We don't like what you stand for anymore. And is
Mhm.
that what you mean by you have to be constantly monitoring what's being said, what's being put out there? And people are watching. We're no longer just saying, oh, that's nice. That's a cute commercial. I'll go buy that, sir. We're like, nope.
Yeah, exactly. So it's what happens is that if you don't distill those things and don't practice them and demonstrate them on a daily basis, it will accumulate if you are misaligned with these things that are important to the company when you first started. And if you don't keep that alignment going, yes, that's where distrust starts to come in. And that's where you really need to rebuild those relationships. You got to reconnect and you need to reestablish those relationships based on quote unquote what you say you're about in relationship to, in that case, you could say, yeah, people, consumers, and clients. So those relationships need to be, you could say, more or less monitor. A lot of times how relationships are monitored, by the way, in my book, is through third party endorsements or reviews, or even when we're asking for testimonials. And that's how you start to find out the consistencies as much as the inconsistencies. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that are going on right now, and it has to be between countries where a lot of distrust has happened. But then there's been a lot of things that those companies or those countries, I should say, where there's been, you could say, certain disciplines and principles have been absent.
Seen a lot of this, and I'm not one of these people that watches TV. In fact, I cut off cable. Oh, geez, it's been a decade or better. I just don't watch it. I never enjoyed it much anyway, and commercials just drive me buggy. So, it was just not something I was willing to, have land in my living room. But these days, and I don't know if you're noticing it, but trust is pretty well shot across the board. And I guess my question to you is, do they apologize? How do they fix it?
Well, best way to fix it, you're exactly right, is to take responsibility and accountability and, put your, but put on your big boy, you get a big boy or big girl pants, right? And become adults, like literally, like become adults and own it. Own that there's been some mischievous things that have been happening rather than trying to sweep it underneath the carpet. And then say that, you know what? We've been, we were misaligned with our values and our principles, and then that you're going to actually reshape them to be what they're originally designed to be, which is to be authentic. So yeah, it's really admitting first. It's like anything, like any relationship, whether it's a relationship between two people, a business and a consumer or client, or two countries, or country to the people for that matter as well, is that you just admit that problem, you admit it. So you show that you're actually are taking accountability, and then you put the corrections in. So you're absolutely correct, is to take accountability, okay, and then put the corrections in.
Examples you can share with us without saying who it is.
Well, yeah, I can even tell you a couple case studies when it comes to like the business to the consumer or client, like Tylenol, for example. I want to give you a couple of really good examples, or where they took responsibility or where they lacked in taking responsibilities. So with Tylenol, this is back, I think it was the 80s, it was or 90s, like mid 80s, maybe late 80s, early 90s. I think it was late 80s is when they had capsules, Tylenol, and then some crazy person was putting cyanide in the capsules because you were able to pull the capsules apart. They immediately, as soon as they found out, they immediately took everything off the shelf, all their product, knowing they were going to take a huge dip in revenue. And what they did is they took full responsibility. And what they did to improve the situation is that they literally created, as we know, the tablets. So not were they capsules, but tablets, and so therefore you could not um, change the actual integrity of the product. And so that was huge, and they built up a stronger following because of it. Because even though it wasn't their fault, but they took responsibility. This is my point, and they took accountability, and then they apologized and they took action. So here's another case where it went the opposite. Um, when Enron did a giant spill, that remember that big huge spill that happened, and millions and millions of, maybe it was thousands, I know it probably was millions of barrels, were leaking, and they were not taking any accountability as this was happening, and it was starting to destroy like coastlines and obviously the sea life. Nothing was happening till like, what was it, like a week and a half later, like 10 days later, and he started to figure out a solution. Like that was really bad. And so that's what I mean, where it could work against you. And that's what gets remembered, by the way, is the things more, unfortunately, the things that are more negative than positive. That's why the news, people thrive on negativity. But anyways, the point being is that unfortunately, that's what gets remembered by the people, by the consumer, by the clients. Okay. So those are just two cases where they took accountability or where they did not take accountability.
I think with Tylenol, if I'm not mistaken, whoever did that has never been flushed out.
Yeah, I don't recall them ever finding the corporate
Yeah,
situation. Yeah.
yeah. And isn't that about the time they started using childproof caps? Because it
Yeah,
used to be you just grab something, you'd open it up, you didn't have to fight with it and pull the foil off and pull the cotton out. It was easy. You just opened it up and popped it into your mouth. Well, and I'm wondering if that was part of the Tylenol thing.
yeah, you're right. It did trigger a lot of safety protocols in different situations with different products. And so you're absolutely right. So, and it was all to protect, of course, the consumer, right? But yes, a lot of things started to get developed as far as safety protocols for consumer consumption of quote unquote products.
Even with pet products. I have pets. I've got a couple of cats that are quite elderly and they need, supplements. And I'll open up their little box and go, okay, here we go. I have to do exactly what I have to do for adult stuff. So peel it open, and I'm glad they do it because our pets, we're a pet nation. So I'm glad that they're trying to keep our pets safe as well. It's annoying every once in a while, but the other side is I know it hasn't been tampered with.
Exactly. Has not been tampered with, and it's not going to inflict any pain on any person or creature, right? So yeah, I actually glad myself as well that they're doing these things for, all living creatures, right?
And I wanted to talk with you, and we hadn't talked about this the last time that we spoke. AI and
Ah.
data-driven marketing, that's big. And everything right now is changing. Look, I'm a techie nerd. I'm a nerd in stilettos. I can't keep up. I just can't. I try, but it's just not going to happen. But what I'm noticing is personalization seems to be the name of the game.
Yeah, so tech, specifically with AI, I'm actually in the process of getting AI certified, and you're right. Oh my goodness, there are so many programs on any one subject.
Oh,
You
I
know,
know. And now that deep speak thing is like, what? Where did that come from? I'm just getting used to chat and perplexity and grok or grok. I can't keep track of it all. I started writing a notebook down. This is new. This is new. I know this one. What the heck is that? It's like, where did it all come from?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So here's what AI cannot do. It cannot be creative or imaginative. You still have to be the what's called, as you know, prompt engineering. You still need to feed it information, okay? And the information is only as good as its outcome. In other words, garbage in, garbage out, right? But the more that you are, you could say, the more that you're educated on a particular subject and you know how to quote unquote narrow down that niche of that subject and ask it very specific questions, you're going to get some really specific, beautiful results. But if you ask very general questions, well, then you're going to get a very general answer. So that's one thing. The other thing too is that with AI, um, it also is not there in a lot of different spaces. Like I've been trying to see what it could do with design, by the way, for example, and it has a long ways to go. But the point being, it's starting to get better. But again, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't understand typography, you don't understand color theory, if you don't understand how to lay things out from dominant to subdominant, well, then you're going to get like what most things are now is that desktop published work where someone owns a computer but doesn't understand how to communicate through design, right? Graphic design or what I call brand design. But so it really has so much to do with what you're putting into the engineering prompt. But the point being is that when you start to, you could say, articulate your engineering prompt for an output, you get some beautiful stuff. Like I use it a lot for a lot of different things. Like today, I had a proposal to put out and like a very specific format that I had come up with, but then we're talking about, maybe 15 other samples I had to show formulate. So I gave prompt, ChatGPT the prompt engineering of what I want all the rest of the samples to look like based on this one sample I created, right? And it did a beautiful job actually creating quote unquote that the rest of those samples from that sample piece in the area of brand designing. Now here's the other thing too. The more I've been feeding it in chat gbt to understand what brand design is, the more, I don't know how it does it, but it's almost like it has its memory bank. Even though it's a different chat, by the way, it will take that information that I've been communicating with it over weeks, and some now it's been I've been using it for over a year now. It taking information from a very long time ago and actually now refining what I want to say without having to start over again from educating what I'm asking for from it. From a lot of like the diction around branding, the terms around branding, it automatically has that in its memory. I don't know how it does it, even though it's a new quote unquote chat that I'm creating a dialogue about. So, anyways, I love the tool. It's super, super, super fast. And I love the ability where I don't have to scour the web. It scours the web for me. And then I get very specific um, answers from very specific questions I'm asking for.
This morning, I use ChatGPT, but I really prefer
Mm.
Perplexity.ai. And I asked it a question about you this morning because I wanted to remember what we had talked about. Was there anything that you were doing that was new? It remembered everything I had ever asked it, and I had deleted those threads. but
Mm.
it still remembered it. That was a little scary. It
Yeah.
really was. I was like, well, I guess I better be polite every time I talk with either one of these. And I'll tell you too, and you probably notice this too. If you get nasty with either one of them, they remember that. So don't say ugly things to your bot. Just don't. I'm always saying thank you. Yeah, but I'm like you, I use it a lot. I love it a lot. I'm here. This bothers me though, and I'm going to have to do more research. I'm in the middle of finishing a book that I've been writing for longer than I like to admit, but it's almost done. And I recognized that I see this all the time. There are people putting up courses and this, that. Oh, you can write an entire book with AI and you can do it in 20 minutes. I want to smack them. Yeah, I really do. That's not what we should, it's not the best and highest use of chat or perplexity or any of them. It has to be in your voice. It has to come from you. And I think
Yeah.
some people are not understanding that. And the thing is, we're not going to trust them. We're going to go back to trust. Once we look at that and we can tell you didn't write it, and we can tell, you just lost any possibility of getting any money out of me ever.
Yeah, you bring up a really, really, really good point because everybody has a tone and a voice. And then it's like, yeah, and all of a sudden you hear someone writing something to you and like, that's not the same tone. And so you're absolutely, absolutely correct. And a lot of times people don't tailor it when they're working with Chat GBT. They're not tailoring exactly what you're saying to that specific character. Okay. So yeah, there's certain limitations in a sense, which is kind of good in my opinion. But there's also things that if you're not an expert in that space and then you're asking it to write a book, well, a lot of it will probably be incorrect, quite honestly, because chat is not perfect. And so I've been experimenting with it and writing some stuff and then asking some information back and realizing how in some areas where it's pretty off and in some areas where it's really on. So
Right. It's
it's
hallucinating.
yeah, exactly. It's hallucinating. I'm like, wait a second. And sometimes like, my wife and I were playing gin rummy and we're asking for the rules, right? And then we're playing and then we weren't sure on a particular rule and then it counter it what it did is actually what's that called it said something that was opposite of what it was contradicting. It was contradicting itself, and then
Yeah.
we're like, wait a second here, you said it was the way, if you have quote unquote these cards and da 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 that it meant this, but now you're telling me it's not that, it's this. What is it? And then it apologizes. It says
I'm telling you, be nice to them. Do not say bad words. And if I'm going to say a bad word instead of F, I'm like, duck you. So because it doesn't know what I just said.
Right, exactly. It can't. It doesn't
Eventually
have.
it'll figure it out and I'll be in trouble again.
But anyways, yeah. So I love using AI. It's when I just think of it as like a tool, like a pencil, right? So when people are getting creative, they're not using their mind, they're using technology for their creativity. They're really not utilizing creativity as in a sense, in its full sense, as far as being authentic, by using tools to assist, not to necessarily create everything for them. Then basically you're just an operator. You're not a creative.
I've gotten to the point where I will go to Perplexity or Chat and say, I need this because I've written it, but I want it to tidy it up, maybe rewrite it to where it's a little bit more elegant. And
Right,
then I'll say, please rewrite this in my own voice. I've trained both of them to speak as I do.
right, right, right.
And it took some doing, let me tell you. It really did. Because I'm one of those people, if I'm thinking it, it comes out. And I'm like, ooh, no filters, no filters. But yeah, it is helpful. But do I use it to create things for me? No, not yet. I don't know that I will, but I do use it to give me ideas
Right,
and
right.
then to tidy up whatever I came up with because I'll be typing away and then I'll go. And when I'm writing something, I will read it back out loud to myself because that works for me. I can see where I've made the mistake. And I'll go back and say, fix this, please. You know, it's a mess. So, but yeah, it's amazing and people are worried about it. But if you're, like you say, if you're teaching it, you're training it, and you're not creating with it, you're using it to take your creativity and make something with it. It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. And it's funny too what you're talking about. At least when it came to like, this isn't my tone. It's kind of funny because Grammarly, okay, when I use Chat GPT and Grammarly, like Grammarly gets all very flowery. Even when I say, okay, don't get so flowery, tone it down, be more factual. But Chat GPT tends to be more factual. So it's interesting. And every one of these type of devices, they have a certain algorithms that change their tone.
Often say thanks, but tone it down. So I use
Yeah.
that a lot too. It's like, that's all great and everything, but that's not how I speak.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, I know. Okay, we're going to get to branding though. So we really are. But part of what we're talking about, chat and AI, is where branding can really, I think, excel because you can find ways to do creative one-liners. You can find ways to do graphics. I'll send over and say, listen, I need 10 ideas for this particular social media client who is a landscaper. And all of a sudden I've got 10 and they're one-liners. I'm, ooh, I can work with that. Then I take it, I write something and it's true to their brand. It's perfect. And it just keeps me from going, well, what am I going to talk about today?
Yeah, you know what? Back, to the tones and so forth, by the way, how this leads to branding is because when it comes to copywriting, and when you exactly what you said that you do to yours as well, is you train it with very specific tone and voice. When we do strategy sessions, like I just finished two strategy sessions, one last week and another one the week before. The point being is that during these strategy sessions, what we're doing as far as the last day, as far as like over, I would say over a course of 3 hours, we're figuring out like what kind of tone should that personality have? Like authority, should it be partnership? Should it be caring? Should it be XYZ? So with those kind of key words, okay, that's how I've been using it for copywriting to get some of the tone through the different quote unquote AIs. And there's actually AIs that are designed specifically for copywriting. And when I work with my copywriter, like a real person, I like going, wow, the AI is actually doing a pretty darn good job figuring out if I put the right prompts in to get the right tone that I'm looking for based on what makes it authentic to that client.
I get what you're saying. I've experimented with some of that as well. And branding has evolved beyond just visual elements. I mean, we can no longer just plunk up a picture and go, look, how cute is that? Go buy something. Can you talk about modern branding, how it incorporates emotional, auditory, and experiential aspects?
Absolutely. So where branding stems from, most people don't realize this because unless you've actually been in the field and actually evolved in the branding. But when I started off, before I even graduated from college, it wasn't even called, there was no category called graphic design. It wasn't even the major until after the year after I graduated, it came up with the major graphic design. It was either it was actually, excuse me, it was either communication or applied art and design at Cal Poly. So you're going to move into the advertising space or you're going to move into design space. And the point being is this, is that what I found branding to be, because we naturally started a brand before anybody else, is that branding is really two parts to it. It's part advertising, the root of advertising, and it's a root of graphic design. And you're exactly right. The word of root is, as far as graphic design, is the aesthetics, how things look and how things feel when you look at them, you know. And then there's advertising, which has to be with the written word, with the positioning of that product or service. And then when you and back in the day, you used to have like advertising agencies that were separate from the graphic design agencies. And then finally, what we started to do is we were the first multidisciplinary firm in LA where we offered both. And we started to combine both and we started to form really the heart and the you could say the DNA makeup for branding companies, which is understanding how to position things with the written word. And then graphic design is how to match that copywriting with the right design. Okay. And now to extend it further, exactly what you're saying with modern branding is what I call now you want to involve as many senses as possible, as many senses as possible. So, for example, when we rebranded WSS, it was just basically a retail shoe store. And what I want to do is create it where it was modern branding, which is part of authentic branding, right? And so the point being is this, we want to give the company a soul. So it was way more than pricing, but what was the heart of the company? And then we want to introduce music. And so we had started to think about having DJs inside the retail space to introduce music to actually lengthen the experience of the shopper and have it more enjoyable. And what I've seen, which is brilliant with hotels, is that they'll have a very specific signature scent for their actual hotel. And I thought that was brilliant. So the more that you can introduce your five senses, the more you're going to be memorable in the mind of the consumer. And so that's what leads to modern branding.
And I just had a thought while you were talking about hotels. There's one hotel, and I can't remember now what it was, but when I walked into the room, I smelled linen, fresh linen. Now,
Mhm,
you know that fresh linen was covered up by, the bedding. I wasn't really smelling the linen, but
mhm,
I sure thought I was. And
mhm.
fresh linen smells really good. So I know what you're talking about. But I didn't really notice. I didn't under it never connected that that was part of their branding.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they say they do branding agencies, I go, well, what background do you have in design and advertising? And when they say none, which is about 90% of these companies, I say, well, you're not really branding. Like you're not, let's put it this way. You're not branding from a world class. So you're not going to be able to represent a company that says they're world class to represent them. So if you're saying, if the company's saying like on a 10-point scale, they're 8, 9, and 10 as far as the value to bring to the customer, they're not going to be able to represent that company because they don't understand the ins and outs of how to truly position a company as being world class.
World class, I love that. When you come into a company and they want to work with you, what are some of the questions? And I think you touched a little bit on it. What are some of the things that you need to know from them so you can figure out, well, they're okay here, but they're completely lacking over here.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what I do with I have what's called a SIM system, SIM, and it stands for strategy, implementation, and management. What I start off before even getting into a SIM system process, I do an online audit and I call it an assessment. And I call it an online business and brand assessment where we spend a full hour together and I go through what's your business model? What is your business model? And I can point out what's missing about the business model in the sense of why it quote unquote is not reaching its true potential. Okay. And then I'll look at their brand and I'll look at their quote unquote, what are they using to represent their brand? And those are called touch points, by the way. So like their website, let's just say like it is a service company, like let's say HVAC company. Okay. So air conditioning, heating. So what do your truck wraps look like? What does your website look like? What do you leave behind as your brochure? And so I go through a whole assessment to see where the misalignments are, and then how it's actually not just from the standpoint to look and the feel and a tone and a voice, but I'm also looking from the standpoint how it's not aligned to the business model. Because the first thing I ask them when I'm in these calls is like, okay, give me a background about who you are and your business, how long it's been, and what makes it unique. And so they're telling me all this information that's super relevant of how they see their company, right? And then as I have their website, because we use Zoom and I'm sharing the screen, and as we're going through their touch point, like their website, I'm going, everything you just told me is not on your website. And by the way, I love what you just told me.
Yeah, I'm a web developer and I know exactly what you're talking. I bet you do this too, Howard. When I'm talking with somebody or, potential client, I'll do the same thing. I have already looked at their social. I've already looked at their website if there is one. I know where they're at and where they're just woefully neglectful. And that's the only way I can put it. Because what I want to ask them, and I do ask them, is okay, we're looking at all this, but here's what's going to happen. Your customer, your consumer, your buyer, whatever you want to call them, they only want one thing: what's in it for them.
Exactly.
And if you
Exactly.
don't have that, you got nothing.
Exactly. And then what's in it for them? And then what are you going to do to deliver that no one else is going to be able to deliver it the way you're going to deliver it? So then the uniqueness of you as a business brand, excuse me, as a business that's actually providing service, product, or information, what are you going to be doing that they will love and that they could only get it from you?
A lot of people, I do it myself. I panic when you just said that. I clutch my stomach. It's like, oh God, I have to go look at my own website now. But you're right. We want to know what's in it for us and how it's going to be delivered, why we can trust them, what is their reputation, and are we going to be sorry once we enter into any kind of agreement with them?
Yeah, and you know why this is so important? Because there's more product services that are out there than ever before, and the space is going to get more crowded, more crowded, and more crowded. So you're not differentiating yourself, then you're another Me Too. And what happens to that? Then you're going to get beaten up on pricing versus that you're going to be quality value driven. Okay. So that's why I say companies at most over 95% of companies at most only reach 95% of their potential. Excuse me, only reach 25% of the potential. But if they did things right, then they could reach over 90 plus of their potential. But unfortunately, most businesses, over 95% of businesses, only can reach 25% of their potential because there's a misalignment between who they say they are and what they can actually deliver, and then what the consumer expectations are and what the consumer actually experiences. And those two have to go hand in hand.
Talked about why branding is so important. And honestly, I talk with a lot of people that, well, I don't really have a brand. Okay. We need to talk. You need to hire someone. Well, can you do it for me? Absolutely not. I am not a branding expert. I know some. I can make introductions, but no. And for some reason, I don't know if it's smaller companies or mom and pop shops or I don't know what it is, but branding is just not important to them yet. And I think that your branding should start before your business starts.
You're exactly right, because most people don't understand what branding is. Your branding as soon as you want a customer. You're saying a signal to them, and whatever that signal is actually reinforcing your position or not, this question is like how well are you positioned to actually earn the trust of that customer. So you are branding as soon as you want a customer, literally. And most people don't realize that. They're like, oh, branding's for big companies. No, every company that we ever branded exactly right out of the gates have been branded properly without having to quote unquote realign them and readjust them or upgrade them. They're so much ahead of the curve as far as reaching a market and dominating a market faster. So you're absolutely right. Like the best time to build a brand is at the conception of a business. In fact, I when I work at startup companies, before the even conception. Why? Because I could point things out that they're not looking at that actually could actually grab up more market share and dominate the market faster than their original idea because their business model is now expanded to reach more quote unquote customers or clients.
Like you prefer to work with new companies than, you know, ones that you have to kind of pull out of the sewer.
Yeah, so I like both. I like new companies because now we don't have to. retrain bad behaviors. And we could start from scratch and start clean and put the good behaviors right into place. But then I love seeing I love working with existing companies and seeing the transformation and seeing the changes in the owners, employees, and customers' faces when things really transform, and that it makes a difference for all the different stakeholders that are involved, of how much more value they feel. And of course, that impacts their bottom line, impacts their much deeper and broader reach in the marketplace. And of course, if those that want to sell their company, they're able to now sell their company.
Just listening to you, that once you've got a company kind of sorted out and they're all excited again, that creativity starts bubbling up, because creativity is stifled when you're worried, when you're panicked, when nothing is going right, when you're not making money, you're barely paying the bills. Creativity just takes a walk out the door.
Right. Yeah. Creativity is, here's the thing. It's like Einstein says, what's more important than knowledge, okay, right, is imagination. You got to start with imagination and creativity first. The biggest problem I see companies do is that they work with and I'm a business developer too. So when a lot of times when companies work with a business developer doesn't understand creativity. And so they're drilling down on what you already have as far as a business model, but they're not in sync, generally speaking, of the latest trends are taking place, because they're generally speaking very left brain. They're about numbers and they're about process systems. Those are super necessary, but when you're creating a company or when you want to take the lid off and redesign the company for greater market share, you have to get creative first. You have to think of what's possible first, and that takes the right side of the brain. And then once you get that done, now you move to the left side of the brain, is now how you're going to get it done and accomplished. So it becomes, looking at the long-term strategy through creativity. And then it comes to the left side of the brain, the tactical things is how you're going to tactically get there through um, having the right team.
And I love that you use the word imagination, because I look around inside my house, I look around outside, I see a car driving by. If there's three cars out there, it's a traffic jam. It's a very quiet neighborhood. And literally, it can get so quiet in here. I can hear water running in the hose outside. It's quiet. But I'll look at things and think, huh, I wonder who came up with that, because everything we look at or touch was created from somebody's imagination.
Yeah, exactly. Everything around you was based on someone's imagination. You're exactly right. Everything around you that's made things as far as what we call lifestyle and convenient life. And it keeps growing faster at a faster rate, right? But that I love the way that Steve Jobs would think, create something that's actually needed before the customer actually knows it exists.
A product, one. That was
Yeah.
it. It
Yeah.
was
We
it.
talk
That's
about
an
bullet.
amazing story.
Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. And that's why he got fired from his own company, is because the board didn't understand imagination first. It's like it's so funny. I could get in a whole dialogue about this because I face a lot of times the bean counters, and the bean counters only are looking at what's the bottom line, but they don't understand. It's the relationships that have to be built from being creative. It's the connections through feeling a product or service. And so it's just funny to work with sometimes the real far left side of the brain people, and they don't see how the right side literally impacts the bottom line.
I'm with you. I don't get that. Look, I can access both. My mother used to tell me I should be an attorney. I can, speak from both sides of my brain. But engineer types, that's who you're talking about, that engineer brain, and they are very much needed, but they also need to get out of the way sometimes. And I suspect telling them that doesn't end up well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting, but you need both. Quite honestly, You need both. You need the left side and the right side, but when the two work together, right? And at the same time, let the geniuses be the left side, let the genius be the right side, right? The point being is that now you have an engine that's really ready to really thrive.
When you brought everything in house, when you were telling me that, the copywriters were in one place, the writers, the people who were creating ideas were in one place, and then they had to go to another building or another company altogether to get it that doesn't even make sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, why did that happen so long? What made you put it all together?
Um, I just I love problem solving, honestly. So ever since I was a little kid, it's like, I'd figure out things that were challenging, very challenging. The more challenging, the more excited I'd get. And like, as I think I mentioned this on your show, maybe I did not, but we literally were one of the first multimedia companies because I cracked the code of how to get stuff out of a Macintosh computer when everybody else was just using the Macintosh computer at the most was to print out like headlines, like black and white headlines, And I want to produce film and I want to produce animations. Um, and out of the computer, and I created my team and we broke the code and we were able to do these things, and it actually helped Fortune 500 companies literally to go global. So I love big challenges, and so for me, after speaking to literally hundreds of thousands of uh, audiences throughout the last 35 years on different stages, I always ask them like, what are their challenges that they're facing? Because I have time to meet people. And it was always these four areas. Their business was not profitable enough. They didn't understand branding, so they really didn't have a strong brand that was working for them. Their marketing was always off and what media to use in marketing, where online or offline or a combination. And then they didn't understand exactly what you point out. Um, the customer's mindset, it's all about them. Like what I call the customer journey. So I spent 10 years building a model to put all these pieces together of how to solve all these problems, but do it in a way that was super efficient and effective. And that would change literally the trajectory of a business where they, instead of just earning like 10% per year, what happened if you could do 10x in a year? What about if it was 1,000x, which I do have testimonies on this, by the way. So it's like, what happened? It was so disruptive versus conventional way of doing things that people are taught in school, right? Like MBA classes and da da da. Like, what if we use really practical things that people haven't been able to solve? So that the reason why I did that is because I'm left and right brain. And so I wanted to solve problems using my brain to be able to come up with solutions that were more effective and more efficient and to reach more businesses. So I know that was that long answer, but that's why I created what I created is really to solve problems.
Listen, I do the same thing. As a web developer, I like to break things and then put
Right.
them back together. It's like, oh, let me go fix that. But you just said something. We're talking about not enough profit, no branding, no marketing. Here's what I think I hear a lot. I'm not positive. I can't point to anything, but I suspect a lot of companies think marketing and branding are the same thing, and they are definitely not.
You are absolutely correct. Marketing and branding can be further away from one another. There is a little bit of overlap, but that's where the danger comes in. A lot of marketing companies say they're doing branding and they're not because they themselves don't understand branding. So it's really interesting. So here are the two categories summed up in a nut, right? Branding is about the long-term strategy and the positioning of a product, service, or information. Okay. It's really looking at the long-term play, like what's the values, what's going to be the philosophy, what's its unique value proposition, right? Marketing and PR is about promoting that brand. Promote, promote, promote. Okay, they're not doing the long-term thinking from the standpoint of the deep thinking as far as the positioning. No, they're doing the tactical the tactical, not strategy, the tactical as far as getting that word out about that brand, okay, either online or offline. So there's a huge difference between the two. And there's actually three parts to branding, by the way. There's strategy that takes usually 10 years to master, which is to figure out the strategy of the brand and its position, and then 15 years to figure out the brand identity, which is what should be the look and feel of that brand for all media, whether billboard, radio spots, TV spots, whether it's the website, product design, package designing, the list goes on, vehicle wraps, the list goes on, right? So brand design takes the longest because it's understanding all the different disciplines in design. Most companies, when you do brand design, they only know websites in social media, but they don't know, hey, how do you design a product? How do you design a packaging for that? What would be the way to conduct and create a actual radio spots? So what happens is that again, they're being misrepresented by a lot of quote unquote companies that say they do branding because they're not going to reach their target market. Oftentimes when I work with clients and I'm looking at how their media, quote unquote, their media budget was put together and their media, quote unquote, campaigns are put together, I'm not kidding. Often they're using the wrong media trying to reach their target market because when we go through a strategy session, that's where we figure out who the target market is and what do you want to tell them. Okay, so marketing, branding, they complement each other, but they are very different. And PR is very different than marketing, by the way, as well. And graphic design is
Yep.
very different than brand design.
Right, right. And you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to ask you about strategies brands can use, but I had to write down, you're talking about, unique, very unique ideas. I started becoming aware of branding I don't know, I wasn't really aware of it, but at some level my mind knew, okay, that's not marketing, that's branding.
Mm,
But I didn't really pay much attention, but Zappos.
mm.
Remember Zappos? I
Oh
mean, they
yeah,
started this whole thing. You talk about unique. I actually bought shoes from them back in the day because if I
yeah.
couldn't wear them, I turned them back.
Well, here's the funny thing is that I had an opportunity to work with Tony Shea. I got invited to meet with him.
He's
Um,
dead now, isn't he? He passed away.
yeah, unfortunately, he passed away. Unfortunately, he passed away. Wow, he was a natural brander, I gotta tell you. I met with him at his office, and just the way his office was set up was brilliant. And the way that you walk up the stairs to get to his office where everyone's on the same level, including him. So he didn't separate himself. He made everyone equal in a sense of being able to voice themselves. But as you're walking up the steps, he was so brilliant. He actually had his values framed, each value framed. So you're walking up the steps, you can't help but read the values of the culture he's creating, right? So I had an opportunity to redesign downtown Las Vegas, but unfortunately he passed away. That was really sad. But he was a natural brander, and you're absolutely right. Going back to Zappos, was like, hey, we're not about shoes. We're about open happiness. I mean, he really was very, very brilliant um, of how he positioned companies, how he positioned Zappos. Okay. What was a little bit difficult is that he was very much the right side of the brain when it came to looking at the beginning of looking at rebuilding, repositioning downtown Las Vegas, right? The old school Vegas, it was the structures weren't in place. So I was a little bit frustrated because there wasn't really any one point person to really talk to, um, because all the divisions were kind of like commingle, but
Oh,
there was
gotcha.
clarity in the roles of each because he did away with the typical hierarchy. But what the problem was that he was burning a lot of fuel and not getting anywhere.
Emotional problems too, I think, and drug problems, I believe it was. But I, what, I just lost my mind. I went completely blank.
Okay, it's one of those
Uh,
days.
No, I've got too many things going. Ask him about this. Tell him about this. Going back to Zappos and going back to what we're talking about, what's in it for me? What was in it for me? And I'll never forget it was like, I can buy shoes and send them back, and I don't have to go to a store. I hate shopping. Hate it, hate it, hate it. I do not, I don't like chocolate and I don't like shopping, but I am a female. I promise I am. But I was like, that hooked me. I could order them, buy them. Most of the times I kept them, but if I didn't, they took them back and paid for it.
Yeah. So where he took that model from was Nordstrom's. Let me tell you a story too, where a brand unfortunately failed. Nordstrom's was all about that. You could buy clothing and no questions asked. A lot of times you didn't even need a receipt. You could bring it back and get your money back. Okay. This is back in the 70s and 80s, right? And then the kids took over Nordstrom's and they changed the philosophy where there's no returns. After the whole brand was built on that, which built so much rapport and relationships and trust. Back to the word trust from the very beginning of the show. Okay. Trust. They actually built such a strong reputation, which is called brand equity. So there's two ways to build brand equity, two forms of brand equity, tangible, intangible. The intangible is emotions. They built so much trust that it was known throughout the community that there's such quality known, of course, but also no hassle returns. And then the kids took over and they didn't want that. Well, the company started taking a big dive because it started to lose all its trust and equity into what it was known for. That's what happens quite often is that when a CEO or the founder leaves the company and it wasn't written down and it's passed to someone else, another CEO or another founder, or excuse me, not the founder, but another person, like a legacy, if it's passed on to the kids, a lot of the messaging, a lot of what the brand is known for gets lost. And that's where companies start to tank very quickly.
I've I've seen a lot of that. It's like the kids take over and they're like, "Oh, we can do it better." Well, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Unfortunately, yeah, especially nowadays with the kids, unfortunately, they think they know more than they do. Not everybody, but I noticed this trend that's happened. That they think they know more than their parents, or people of that age without having the experience. And that's why I think too, why more companies collapse faster is because of that reason. But that's not, of course, a whole generation, but I just noticed this trend that's been happening.
my brother-in-law, he had built up a remarkable business here in Southwest Louisiana, and he turned it over to his son. It lasted a year and 4 months, I think. It
Yeah.
didn't take long. Absolutely destroyed it.
Unfortunately.
Mm.
But it's unfortunate these things happen. The ones that are the best in the sense of the past and the legacies when you teach the kids and they're in the business, right? They're understanding the ins and outs of the business. They're understanding even all the way to taking out the trash to making critical decisions from the strategy standpoint. Those are the ones that do very, very well when they know the ins and out and the entire business of how it's run and the brand of what it means to the customer.
You're, you're the mail boy. When you're brought into the company, you're taught how to get the mail to the desk. You're taught everything. And I'm not sure that happens as often as it should.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not happening as much as it should. But
One last question.
sure.
Today's omni-channel world, we're everywhere. Consistency seems to me at least more important than ever. So, and this is where I was going to ask you about strategies. What strategies can brands use to ensure that their messaging, their tone, and their personality remain consistent against all platforms from social media to stores? Because let's face it, social media in particular, each platform has its own kind of way that they want to be talked to. If you're over at, business to business, LinkedIn, you can't do fluffy stuff. If you're at Facebook, you can get a little bit more fluffy. Instagram, I don't even know. So, what advice can you give people about that?
Sure. It all starts with a strategy. What we do here is called a master blueprint. And we figure out like, okay, what's the tone of the brand? What's the look of the brand? What is the message of the brand? What is going to be the actual personality archetype of the brand? what's going to be its vision, philosophy. So all this gets in part two, it building out the identities, all gets placed in and laid out in what we call brand manual. Very different than a style guide. Style guide is usually like, here's the logo and here's what you're not supposed to do with it. Here's the fonts and the colors. And that's pretty much where it stops. That's what's called a really, a lack of a better word, but basically a style guide, not a manual, but
Canva, seriously, I see people going, here it is. Here's everything you need. It's in Canva. No, no, that's
yeah,
not what I'm looking
exactly.
for.
Exactly. And unfortunately, the consumer doesn't know any better until, they start working with me and I start pointing out what's all missing, which is 90%, right? And like, wait a second here, you're saying that we're missing this, and this. I said, yeah, because exactly what you pointed out, it's really involving as many senses as possible. So you got to be clear how things are going to be used on different channels. So it's a brand manual where you have your philosophy, like I mentioned, your vision, your brand promise, your brand attributes, the archetype of the brand, but also the style of copywriting and the look and feel of images, and even the trade dress. Trade dress is a certain look and feel. Okay, like Apple has a very specific clear trade dress, which is very clean, right? So the point being is that all that gets put into the brand manual. So then, therefore, internal use and third party use, everyone's always on the same page of what to use and how it should be used.
You said about brand dress. I've never heard that before.
Okay, yeah. So trade dress is basically
Trade dress. Okay.
yeah, so trade dress is basically has a certain look and feel to it. Just real simple. It's kind of like with Campbell soup, like the red, like every Campbell soup has that very specific look, so it's highly identifiable on a shelf of the store. The great thing about it and the brilliant thing about it is that now really having more than just one type of product on a shelf, it has like all the different types of soups you can get. Now it just monopolizes the shelf. Okay, that's called a trade dress, which is a similar look and feel. Even cars are starting to do it. Finally, they've gotten smart about it. BMW has always been there. Ferrari's always been there. Certain cars have always had a trade dress, like let's just take like the BMW. Has the kidney beans, right? That has to do with it because there's a heritage in it because of how they won races. A lot of these race cars actually now are for consumer use, but there's a certain look and feel. That's a trade dress. Finally, other cars have caught on and starting to, like Lexus, for example, are starting to do their own trade dress when it comes to the front end of the car that's highly identifiable. Okay. And so, anyways, what happens is when you're highly identifiable, you start to monopolize this not only the market, but people's minds.
I don't even know if you can buy a Jaguar anymore, but you always knew. You could look at the front or the back and you knew what that car was.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So,
I always wanted one. I knew better, but I thought they were so pretty. I also knew that they were not going to run often, so
Yeah,
because
see what you just said is brand equity. So that's a negative.
right.
So the negative
Yeah,
brand equity is what is the reputation of what they're known for, which is crappy wiring, right? And then what they're known for too, as a positive brand equity, is the beautiful lines. They look super elegant.
they are. If I see one, and it doesn't happen often, I just stand there and drool. I mean, they're just so beautiful. I would never own one.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's too bad, but I'll have a picture of one. I'll take that. Howard, we are sadly running out of time, and I want to thank you for being with me here again. Before I let you go, do you have any final thoughts or advice, and where can people, our audience, connect with you? Because branding, branding's different from marketing. So find Howard.
Yeah, so they can connect with me under Howard A. Lim, the middle initial A, on all the different channels. Okay, so they connect me. Most of the channels I'm on though is LinkedIn, Facebook. Okay, um, but what I will do if they're interested, I'll love to do a brand assessment. What I usually charge like $2,500 on my website, I'll do it for $500. They just put a code in under the assessment part. Um, where it says, type in a code, and if you type in HOW and hit apply, it reduces the price to $500, and I'll do a full assessment for an hour, and then improve literally what they have now, so they can make changes immediately, so they can get the traction they really want, whether existing company or a company that wants to expand or grow.
Make that offer again. I just wrote it down, but do it again, because I know people are going, hang on. How do I do that?
Oh, okay. So basically, if they go to, let me just pull it up here. If they go to how creative /assessment, howcreative.com/assessment, that's how HOW, and then creative, creative.com/assessment, they will go to a form to fill out, and for their credit card and information about them. And if there's a code, it says coupon code. And if they click on that coupon code and type in HOW, what will happen is that they will be able to get a substantial discount on the assessment.
I'm sending that to people. Listen, everybody, in this transformative podcast episode of your podcast, Your Partner in Success Radio, Howard Lim unveils the secrets of authentic, consumer-centric branding that can revolutionize. I can't talk. I do this right about this time every week. I start going blah, 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 blah. It's at the very end of the show. Okay, let me try this again. Drawing from 30 years of experience with industry giants like Apple and Disney, he shares strategies that build meaningful customer connections and drive significant value. And here's the key insights: branding beyond visuals, creating authentic customer experiences. And this is the important part: strategies that generate real business impact. So connect with Howard. Get his book, Authentic Branding. I have it. It's one of my favorites. I grab it all the time. Visit How Creative for brand consulting, and he just told you how to get that coupon. And then follow him on LinkedIn and social media. So transform your brand today, because great branding isn't just about looking good. It's about making a genuine and lasting connection. Howard, thank you so much. And anytime you want to come back, you just let me know.
Thank you. It's been such a delight. I love being here on your podcast and having our conversations. They're awesome.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.